Okay, well, thank you for joining us for today's Tuesdays at 2. And I mentioned a little bit earlier while we were waiting to get started that there are some free printables used in today's session for everyone that signed up. You will be getting those in an email afterwards. Okay, I am your host, Antoinette LaGrossa. Thank you for joining us for Brighten Your Day with Spring Activities. We have some fun multisensory spring and summer activities for you to enjoy in and around your home. Most activities can be enjoyed by all ages, and we do have those free printables to go along with the session. If you don't have them, just email us at blog@ShillerLearning.com. I want to start with an activity that has additional relevance with the restrictions that are happening with the activities and drastic changes to our kids' schedules. And this is telling a story together. For this, you'll need no materials or special equipment. Just get together with your child and say, let's tell a story. And we'll take turns saying one sentence or line, if your child doesn't yet know what a sentence is, of the story. Then proceed with telling the story, allowing each person to add on another line. Depending on the child's level, this can be a great time to review parts of a sentence, parts of a story, storytelling sequence, and narration skills. And then, in light of current events, this can also be an opportunity to uncover a child's anxiety or uncertainty about what's going on. If your child goes in the direction of a doomsday scenario, rather than being tempted to redirect, take notes and address the concerns they may have and reassure after the story has ended. And I just want to remind you to look to the CDC and your official local and state government agencies for rational, fact-based information that you can share with the kids. And don't think that this activity is just for younger kids. This is a lot of fun with older kids too. Okay, now let's get outside and get moving. If this is an opportunity to see your own backyard in a new light, if you don't have a yard, you can, of course, use a common outdoor area or public park. But right now, remember to practice the appropriate physical distancing that's going to, promote all of our health and well-being. So for this activity, you'll want to provide the child with our free printable nature book pages, or of course you can use your own. And my chat window disappeared. Let me just get that back. Okay, there we go. I do want to see if anyone happens to have a question during the presentation. Okay. So this is a great activity to get bodies moving, and with the printable nature book pages or your own nature journal, challenge your child to find 4 things from nature to either draw or write about, or a combination of drawing and writing, as age and ability appropriate for your child. Allow the child time to find a few small objects to tape onto their nature pages as well. When you're doing found objects, it is important to remember leave no trace. So you don't want to disturb habitats or take parts of live plants if this is happening outside of your own yard. Outside of your own yard, you want to stick to things like sticks and items discarded by nature, like fallen leaves, acorns, pine cones, cicada shells, or even a snakeskin shed. Those are all things that could be collected without, disturbing the environment for either, um, you know, animals or, other visitors who are going to come later. Now, you could change this activity up by encouraging your child to pick one type of plant or animal, such as trees or birds, to draw or write about for that day. This activity can be done daily, with each day being for things that haven't been noted previously. And that's where the fun really is going to kick in, because you're going to discover things that you haven't noticed before and are generally missed at first glance. And then when you find something, or your child finds something that you have no idea what it is, Google and share the discovery of new information with your child. I'll actually be doing this one today with my 10 and 14-year-olds. Okay, let's plan a garden. In this activity, children will help create a layout for a garden. You'll need some paper, pencil, coloring materials, and a ruler. Side note, in ShillerLearning, we use a clear ruler um, in our Math Kits 1 and 2. If you have not tried a clear ruler for measurement, you're going to want to get one of those. It's so much easier to measure with a ruler that you can see through. Okay, so that aside, you can use this practical work to lay out your home garden plot, a container garden, or even as a creative work for a someday garden. Older children may create multiple layouts independently, while younger kids will likely need some suggested guidance. First, you'll need to figure out how large you want your garden to be. You'll need to figure out length and width. This is an opportunity to show area and how to calculate that. Um, and you can ask the child to measure out the garden in your backyard and provide guidance or assistance as appropriate for the child. If you're using containers, you want to decide how large each container is going to be. Um, Next, the child will draw a grid, creating rows and columns. You'll need to decide on your key or grid representation. For example, 1 square equals 1 square foot, or 1 square yard of your garden, or maybe one container, whatever you decide on. Okay. If the child needs assistance creating the grid, go ahead and do that. Help them lay out those rows and columns. So using your grid, map out what you'd like to put in each area of the garden. Students may choose to draw or write what should go in each section of the garden. And this is an example of a plan um, that a 6-year-old child had come up with. So in addition to practicing math skills, this is an opportunity to include some practical botany study too. So which plants are going to thrive when planted next to each other, which plants are best to avoid planting in the same area as another, as well as getting into discussions of native versus invasive species, and are there any precautions that should be taken when planting a particular type of plant. For example, mint, that's one that's going to continue growing and spreading. So sometimes you want to make special considerations for that. Okay. With your plan, you can ask some math-related questions, such as what is the width in feet or meters of the garden? If it was measured in feet, the older kids can convert that to the metric, doing that for width as well as length, and then area, that length times width. And again, that can be converted to different measurements, um, calculating the perimeter as well, and then getting into percentages. So what percentage of the garden has vegetables versus flowers or herbs? You can, depending on what you're putting in your garden, you can calculate all of those. And then how many of each type are going to fit into its place on the grid. So when you're planting, it'll tell you that you have to space your plants so many inches apart from each other. So you can calculate the multiples, the possible multiples of each type of plant too. So the gardening, it is multidisciplinary. It's going to pull in a lot of areas. And then this is an activity that you can plan and start now and is going to carry you through into the summer. And it's an activity that really gives you something to look forward to as well. Okay, our next activity is a wildflower memory game. I really like this one personally. It is great for learning the names of flowers, which when I was a kid, I didn't know the proper names of all of the flowers. Um, oh, Here we go. So for this, you will need the free printable that we are providing for the wildflower cards, and then of course, scissors for cutting those out. You'll look at each pair of flowers one at a time, discuss the name of the flower and any attributes unique to the flower. Give the child plenty of time to observe and enjoy each flower. Uh, if you are able to match those flowers to things you have in the yard, that is awesome. When the garden centers open, you can take the cards there and find examples of them that they can see in person. Um, for younger children, you can start with not the full set. For example, you could start with 3 pairs instead of all of them. Shuffle them up and lay them face down into a grid on the floor or tabletop, wherever you're playing. And then the players are going to take turns turning over a card, 2 cards, and seeing if they can find a match. You've probably all played a matching game previously. So it's just like that. An extension of this is to cut off the botanical name from the bottom of one set of the cards, and then the student with the cut set can match the name to the proper flower, and then used the uncut set as the control to check to see if they're correct. So it would be a self-correcting material. That's a great activity for older kids as well. Okay. Uh, Also, in the garden, we can get outside and start finding and learning about some worms. Oh, there we go. Okay. For this, you can use a little hand shovel or a larger garden shovel. Before you head outside, if you have books that talk about worms, now's a great time to pull those off of the shelf. Otherwise, you can use the internet to do a little research about worms, find some videos and information. Then go ahead and head outside, dig some worms up and observe them. See if you can match the type of worms you're finding in your yard to, the types of worms that you were able to discover in your books or on the internet. Another fun extension of this and a science project would be to make your own composting bin with worms. Worms are fabulous for accelerating that composting process, and they add additional nutrients to your compost. So worms, they are important. They're crucial to our gardening efforts and often unappreciated, underappreciated creatures. So let's spend some time getting to know them and learning more about them. For the flower lacing cards, we have a free printable for those. In addition to the printable, you will need a hole punch and some string and a child's safety needle or some tape to tape off the end of the string for very young children. So you'll want to punch out the lacing cards on the provided holes. And of course, if the child is able to do so independently, even if they stumble through it and you might have to print a replacement set for them to give another try, whenever possible, we want the child to be doing things for themselves. Um, and that's going to allow them to become independent earlier than if we are, always jumping in and doing things for them. Okay, so you'll want to thread the needle with enough yarn or floss to sew through all of the holes on the space, on the flower shape. So you can guide your child through taking the yarn and going around the area that you'll be lacing and providing some extra for that in and out. You can demonstrate for the child how to sew through the holes on the card and then allow the child to sew the card on their own. And this activity is really wonderful way of developing eye-hand coordination and fine motor skills that kids need for writing in a way that they can also, enjoy a seasonal activity, and they can color the cards as well. Okay, with this, we can get back outside into our yard. Again, this should be done in your own yard if you're going to be picking flowers, or maybe in from one of the house plants that you have. You can gather the flowers. You'll need heavy books and some parchment paper. Start with a a flower that is a little more simple. So not a real thick, dense flower. A daisy works really well because it has, that single layer of petals. So you're going to use the heavy books. You can either um, do it in the middle of a book or place the parchment paper on top of the book. Place the flower on the parchment, then cover with another piece of parchment, and place several other stacked books that are heavy on top of it. You want to leave the books for about 2 weeks. It's best if you're not tempted to peek at this during the process, because sometimes if we're moving the books, it can end up distorting the flower before it gets pressed and dried. So once you have that dried pressed flower, they're lovely to use contact paper or laminating sheets to make different projects with the flowers. Uh, Going into May, the kids can even use the flowers then to decorate Mother's Day cards. So there's a lot you can do with them once you've got those pressed, including them on your nature journal sheets. Okay, some more ideas that you can be enjoying right now. Water play. What kid doesn't love to play in water? So you can set up a few 5-gallon buckets or whatever you have around the house with water, and let them make predictions about if items will sink or float. You can also do some measurement equivalents, either pouring between cups or starting with uh, teaspoons. You can uh, count how many teaspoons go into a tablespoon, and then tablespoons into, let's say, a quarter cup, and then how many quarters into a half, halves into a whole, on up into pints, quarts, gallons. Um, Seeing those measurement equivalents are a great way for kids to remember those. We can also use the opportunity to learn about the water cycle. Spring showers are the perfect way to start studying the water cycle and how that works in your own community. We can also do some spring cleaning. This is going to be a great time to get ready for a garage sale down the road or donate no longer used items. Holding a garage sale is an incredibly educational experience, from advertising and organizing, payment, making change, everything in between. A yard sale is a great learning opportunity, and with plenty of time for planning while we're all at home. Once people are out and about again, they'll be looking for local events to go to. You can also create a nature sensory basket. Sensory baskets are a classical part of a Montessori education. You can give your child a basket or bag and let them fill it with items from nature that they find interesting. And then you can fill in that space maybe with rice or quinoa or flaxseed, something that you have at home that they can dig through and find those things. Let's see, sidewalk chalk. We can also use that to get outside and practice handwriting and even math facts out in the sun and fresh air. Stargaze. For younger kids, send them to bed early and then surprise them with, waking them up for star watching, or for the older kids getting to stay up, later until it's plenty dark and, most of the neighbors have their outside lights off. Uh, there are apps you can download to help you know what you're viewing. So let us know what some of your favorite spring activities are and what you're doing to, get the kids outdoors and enjoy the season. We'd love to see what you're doing to, freshen up your routine. Share pictures on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest. Make sure you tag us with your favorite activities so that we can share them with others for taking advantage of the season and fending off boredom and restlessness while all of our kids' activities are on hold for the time being.